got time. You good? Everybody good? Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This past Saturday, July 9th, local law enforcement received notification that inmates Thomas Henry Cromwell IV and Sean Christian Black had escaped from the River City Correctional Center in Cincinnati. At the time of the escape, Cromwell was incarcerated on charges of assault and child endangering, while Black was incarcerated on a charge of obstruction of a criminal investigation. Arrest warrants for escape were issued for both Cromwell and Black. Yesterday afternoon, Hamilton County Sheriff's Office detectives, as well as Mason Police Department officers, observed a man that they believed to be Cromwell enter into the Baymont Inn in Mason, along with an unknown female subject. Law enforcement officers attempted to make contact with the man in the hotel room that he and the female were both occupying at the time, at which point they heard him make life-threatening statements toward the female subject. As a result of these threats, the Mason Police Department requested assistance from the Warren County Tactical Response Unit, which I'll sometimes refer to as the TAC team. Members of the TAC team responded to the hotel for an apparent standoff hostage type situation. Negotiators with the TAC team made contact with the man, now determined to be Cromwell, yesterday evening and continuing overnight into the early morning hours this morning. During this time, Cromwell made additional statements that led law enforcement to believe that the female subject's life was in danger. As a result, the TAC team made the decision to enter the hotel room that Cromwell was currently occupying with that female subject. The TAC team forced entry into the hotel room and confronted Cromwell, ultimately using lethal force against him. Cromwell was then determined to be deceased at the scene. Preliminary investigation has determined that Cromwell was holding the female subject at knife point at the time the TAC team made entry into the room, and that knife was discovered next to Cromwell's body. Mason Police Department contacted BCI so that an independent agency could handle both the collection of the evidence as well as handling the investigation into the TAC team's use of lethal force against Cromwell. BCI's investigation is still in its very, very early stages. Once it is completed, BCI will turn its findings over to our office for review. As I said, this investigation is very early in its stages, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but there's probably going to be a lot of questions at this point in time I'm not going to be able to give you the answers to. I want to give you that warning right now. Yes? Yeah, we're not going to be. We're still in the infancy of the investigation. There's still a number of officers that are part of the TAC team that still need to be interviewed. But the TAC team is made up of a number of Warren County law enforcement agencies. It's a county-wide operation. To answer your other question, there was, at least at this point in time, there appears to have been one shot fired, and that ended up being the fatal shot. Yes, ma'am. In relation to this particular incident, no. As to whether there's other charges out there, I really can't comment on that. Yeah. Right. The investigation, as it stands right now, the information that we have is that these two individuals, Mr. Cromwell and our female subject, met each other yesterday afternoon, shortly before entering the Baymont Inn. That they had actually met there in the parking lot. Initially, we did not believe it was a hostage situation, but once law enforcement became aware that Mr. Cromwell may be in that room and attempted to make contact with him, it then turned into a hostage standoff situation. And based on the statements that the officers heard made at that point in time, as well as continuing through the night into the overnight hours, at that point they believed that her life was in imminent danger, and at that point they made the decision to go ahead and breach the hotel door and confronted Mr. Cromwell and ultimately fired one shot, which killed him. We are not. Hold on one second. You had a question. No, there were only two individuals: the female subject and Mr. Cromwell. He is still at large. Mr. Black is. Right. Right. Yes, it's part of the investigation. In terms of the amount of the role that it played, we're still in the process. You know, these TAC team officers were awake for 27 hours, so we want to give them the opportunity to get some preliminary information, but then go home and get some rest after a critical incident, which is obviously a stressful situation for anyone to be a part of. So those interviews are going to be done within the upcoming days, and we'll be able to have more information as to how big of a role something like that played. But certainly you've seen the video, and you understand the concerns that existed once that video was discovered. Hold on a second. She's got a question in the back. I don't know what you mean by officially labeled. I would say this, and this is probably the best way I can answer your question. Had he survived, I do think you would have found him charged with either a kidnapping charge or an abduction charge. So that's probably the best way that I could answer that question. That I'm not aware of. I mean, generally speaking, when you have officers involved in an officer-involved shooting, there's some level of administrative leave. But again, we've yet to conduct all the interviews of all the officers, and so that'll be in the upcoming days. Yeah. I do not. The information that I had was that Hamilton County became aware that he was there. There was obviously some communication with Mason Police because obviously that hotel is in the city of Mason. And from that point, that's when kind of my involvement, our case started. Yeah, it's my understanding the hotel was evacuated, so I'm not sure where that information came from. But I can tell you when I was there early morning hours this morning, the hotel was evacuated. As far as BCI's investigation, BCI investigates all of the facts, and without bias, prejudice, editorialization, anything along those lines, they present it to our office for determination as to whether we think there's any type of criminal conduct on the part of anyone, whether that be a law enforcement officer, whether it be anyone else. And so we'll make that determination after we've reviewed the evidence. But there's not really a limitation on the scope of BCI's investigation. They're going to investigate the facts and put it all together in a case file to present to us, and then we'll review all that information. Right. Right. I don't have a specific time frame in terms of being able to provide that to you. As I said, we're trying to get as much information as we can accurately relate to you out as quickly as possible. But again, this was something that happened after some of these officers have been on duty for 27 hours, so we still have got a considerable amount of work before we're going to be releasing anything more than what I already have. To my knowledge, there were no body cams that were utilized. Warren County, not all Warren County agencies have body cameras. Some Warren County agencies have just, and when I say just, I'm talking about some within the past few weeks have deployed body cams. I'm not aware of the TAC team. The TAC team is a separate entity, not legally per se, but it's a there's a MOU that exists among the TAC team members, and so there are their own policies that they follow when acting on behalf of the TAC team. And so I'm not aware of whether the TAC team has policies that govern body cams, and so if they don't, I doubt that they would wear them during TAC team activities, even if their home agency had body cameras. But to my knowledge, there is, at this point in time, and again, that could be proven wrong down the line, I'm not aware of there being any body cam of any the events that I've described. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I mean, you know, we obviously we don't get a ton of these types of cases. I mean, we get some of them, obviously, but some of your bigger cities obviously get significantly more officer involved shooting. So yeah, it's something that when something like that does happen in Mason, it I think gets everybody's attention. Even though he just ended up in Mason, I'm not aware of him having any real ties to Mason. He's a Hamilton County guy. Sometimes we see a lot of our trouble get imported from north and south of here into Warren County, not from our own residents per se. But yeah, it's not something that happens every day in Mason for sure. No, it's my understanding that they had met in the parking lot shortly before going into the hotel. Yes, yeah. I mean, at this point in time, the investigation, the information I have is that I think you could say probably the first, and I don't want to give a specific timeline, but the first minutes to hours that the two of them were together was consensual on the part of her. She was there with him consensually. He was actually with her in her room consensually. When law enforcement showed up and attempted to make contact with the person who they believed at the time was Mr. Cromwell, that's when the situation escalated, and that's when he began to make threats that law enforcement officers heard at that point in time, and obviously it became a non-consensual situation at that point. She was not free to leave. Yes, ma'am. In terms of where they were in the room, they were at the door of the room when they heard the threats. When they heard the threats being made, they attempted to make contact with him at the room, at the entrance to the room, and that's when they heard the threats being made. Physically, there were no known injuries that I'm aware of in terms of that, but certainly shaken up. Yeah. Right. Right. At this point, it's too early in the investigation. I mean, those are things that we would obviously like to know just for the purposes of having a complete picture of what got him, you know, to that point to where he's escaping on, like you said, a charge of assault and child endangering to the point to where now we're threatening the life of somebody that you're holding hostage. So yeah, I'm not sure what caused him to make bad decision after bad decision. It's too early for me to comment on something along those lines. We've got a lot more digging to do to figure out what motive there may have been on his part to have pursued, and I use that term deliberately, to have pursued this outcome. I don't know the answer to that. To my knowledge, the weapon that was you all have seen the video. So the weapon that was brandished in the video appears to be the same weapon that was located in the hotel room next to his deceased body, which was that knife. I've seen the video. You're asking for my interpretation of that. When I was looking at the video, I believed that he was the one, based on just body angles. It seemed to me as if somebody was doing a selfie video, but I've not looked at it that close. I did not get the impression that she was shooting that at all. Yeah, I mean, I can't defend it. There's not been any testing or any analysis to see if he was holding the phone. But just as a layperson looking at it, it appeared to me as if he was the one that was recording that video. Other questions? Turn yourself in now. No, and you know, there's, you know, obviously autopsy was conducted today already. So we'll be waiting on the results of that. There'll be probably toxicology that's part of any autopsy. There'll be toxicology that's run. That's usually several weeks. So I would not anticipate anything terribly soon. These investigations take time. We want to be thorough. But yeah, I would expect it to be months. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. It was a single shot. It was a single shot that, based upon what I observed, based upon what the detectives obviously observed, and based upon what the coroners told us, was likely the fatal shot. Other questions? All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry I was tilted this way the whole time. They were a hot side of the room. So you just got the side profile the entire time.